Lily had always worked hard for everything she had. Growing up, there were challenges, especially being one of the few black women in her field. But she never let that stop her. From the time she was young, she learned that determination could overcome almost anything. Her parents had taught her that nothing in life came easily, and the rewards were always sweeter when they were earned. She had held on to that belief tightly, even when things weren't going as smoothly as she had hoped. When she finally got the promotion she'd been working toward for years, the first thing she did was reward herself. She had always dreamed of owning a luxury car, and now, thanks to her hard work and dedication, that dream was within reach. She spent weeks researching, picking out the perfect model, and finally settling on a Lamborghini. It wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of her journey. It represented her success, her struggles, and everything she had overcome to get to this point. When Lily first drove the car home, she felt a rush of excitement. It wasn't just about the car itself, but what it meant for her. As she cruised through her neighborhood, her heart swelled with pride. She had done it. She had made it. She parked it carefully in her driveway and took a moment to admire it. The sleek black design gleamed in the sunlight, a sharp contrast to the ordinary cars around it. To Lily, it wasn't just a vehicle. It was a reflection of her dreams turned into reality. However, Lily quickly realized that not everyone saw her success the same way. She wasn't naive enough to think that everyone would be happy for her. Still, she hadn't expected the kind of attention that followed her new purchase. At first, it was just curious glances, people staring as she drove past. But soon things began to change. The whispers started. People in the neighborhood began talking. It wasn't long before the gossip turned into something darker. Lily had always been a private person, not one to show off or draw attention to herself. But she also refused to hide what she had worked so hard for. It wasn't about showing others up. It was about honoring herself. But the more she drove the Lamborghini around, the more she felt eyes on her. People looked at her differently. Some looked admiring, but others looked with judgment. And that judgment began to weigh on her. One afternoon, as Lily drove her car back from the grocery store, she noticed a group of people gathered outside one of the houses nearby. They weren't just talking. They were pointing at her. She could hear the laughter even from inside her car as she passed by. At first, she didn't think much of it, chalking it up to people being people. But as she turned the corner and drove closer to her house, she saw that the group was still watching her. This time, their laughter wasn't the kind that made her feel good. It was mocking, cruel. It made her skin crawl. She tried to shake it off and parked the car in her driveway, but their voices followed her. "Look at her, she thinks she's somebody now," one of the voices called out. Lily didn't turn around. She simply got out of the car, feeling the weight of the comments settle into her chest. She had always been taught to ignore negativity, to rise above it, but it wasn't that simple this time. She could feel their eyes on her as she walked toward her front door. The heat of their stares almost unbearable. She wanted to scream at them, tell them everything she had been through to get to this point, but she didn't. She knew better than to let their ignorance get to her. Still, it lingered. The taunting, the whispers, the looks, and it was all too much. The next day, things escalated. As Lily was getting out of her car to bring in groceries, she noticed the same group of people hanging around. They were standing near her driveway, talking amongst themselves. She didn't want to make a scene, so she decided to ignore them again. But one of the men in the group, someone she had never seen before, stepped forward as she walked by. "What's up, lady?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You really think you're all that just because you can drive a fancy car? Don't you know some people here work for a living?" Lily stopped in her tracks. She'd been expecting the comments to continue, but hearing them out loud, directed at her, felt different. It stung. She had worked hard for her car, for everything she had. She hadn't stolen anything, hadn't taken anything that wasn't hers, but somehow to them it felt like she didn't deserve it. "I worked just as hard as anyone," Lily said, trying to stay calm. "I didn't get this car because of luck. I worked for it," the man scoffed. "Right, sure you did. You really think anyone here believes that? You don't belong here, lady." Lily was shocked. She had always tried to stay out of conflicts, but this was too much. The man and his friends were mocking her, her car, and everything she had worked for. She could feel her hands balling into fists, her blood beginning to boil, but she didn't want to let them see her angry. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction. Instead, she looked the man straight in the eye and spoke calmly. though her voice trembled. I belong wherever I choose to be. This car doesn't make me better than anyone else. It's just a car, but it's mine and I earned it. The man looked her up and down, sizing her up as if trying to figure out what her next move would be. But before he could say anything else, Lily turned and walked up to her front door. She didn't look back, though she could feel the weight of their eyes on her piercing through her. The laughter, the whispers, and the rude comments continued, and she knew that this was just the beginning. As she stepped inside her home, she leaned against the door, feeling a wave of frustration wash over her. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and this was how people saw her? She had never felt like an outsider in her own neighborhood until now. But Lily wasn't one to back down. She had faced challenges before, many of them harder than this. If there was anything she knew, it was how to stand strong. She wouldn't let them tear her down. She wouldn't let their jealousy and ignorance take away her pride. The days that followed were filled with a heavy tension that Lily couldn't shake. Every time she drove her Lamborghini, she could feel eyes on her. The whispers followed her wherever she went, and the mocking laughter was never far behind. It wasn't just the group of people from her neighborhood anymore. It seemed like everyone had something to say about her new car, her success, and the way she carried herself. It was as if they were watching her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. Lily tried to ignore it, but it was hard not to notice the cold stares when she walked into the local store, or the pointed remarks when she passed by. She had never been the type to crave attention, but this felt different. This was judgment, and it wasn't just about her car. It was about who she was and what she had achieved. There were moments when she wanted to roll down her window and shout back at the people who had been talking behind her back, but she knew that would only make things worse. It would give them exactly what they wanted. One afternoon, as she was driving home from work, she saw the group again. They were gathered on the corner near her house, laughing and talking loudly. Lily felt her stomach tighten. She didn't want to be the subject of their conversation again. But this time, they weren't just watching her as she drove by. They were waiting for her. She could feel it. As she parked the car, she heard someone yell from across the street, "Hey! You think you're better than us now? Just because you got that fancy car?" Lily sighed, her hand tightening around the car door. She had been hoping for some peace, some time to relax, but it seemed that wasn't going to happen. The same man who had spoken to her before was standing there, grinning like he'd just won a prize. The others in the group had gathered around him, all watching her intently. She didn't want to make a scene, but she also wasn't going to let them get away with this. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and faced the group. "What is it now?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She was tired of the insults, tired of the ridicule. It felt like they were trying to take away the one thing that had made her proud of herself. The one thing that reminded her that she had accomplished something against all odds. The man who had spoken before stepped forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look at you, walking around here like you own the place. Who do you think you are?" Lily stayed calm, though every part of her wanted to lash out. She could feel her heart racing, the adrenaline starting to take over, but she reminded herself to stay composed. She wasn't like them. She had earned her success, and she wasn't going to let them take that away from her with their petty words. "I'm just a person like anyone else," she said, her voice firm. "I worked hard for this car, just like I've worked hard for everything else in my life. I didn't get here by luck. And I'm not trying to show off or make anyone feel bad. This is just something I've wanted for a long time, and now that I've finally gotten it, I'm proud of it." The man scoffed, shaking his head. "Oh, we know. You're real proud of yourself, aren't you? You think you're so much better than the rest of us." Lily could feel the anger building, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she turned to the rest of the group, hoping to appeal to them. "I'm not here to make anyone feel less than. If you're mad because you think I don't deserve this car, then I'm sorry. But I'm not going to apologize for what I've worked for." For a moment, there was silence. The group seemed to hesitate, unsure of how to respond. The man who had been leading the insults narrowed his eyes at her. "You think you're special, don't you?" Lily didn't flinch. "I don't think I'm special. I think I'm a person who's worked hard for what I have, and I don't think that should make anyone hate me or look down on me." She could see the man's expression shift slightly, but he wasn't ready to back down. "Well, some people don't like seeing people like you driving around in cars like that. You think you're above it all. You don't fit in here." Lily felt a knot form in her stomach. She didn't fit in. She had been living in this neighborhood for years. She had always been friendly, polite, and respectful. She had never once thought about herself as better than anyone else. The only thing that was different now was the car, and somehow that had become a symbol of everything they thought she was. "I don't need to fit in," Lily said, her voice growing steady. "I'm not trying to be better than anyone else. I'm just trying to live my life the way I see fit. This car doesn't change who I am. It's just something that makes me happy, and I'm not going to apologize for that." The man scoffed again, clearly unsatisfied with her answer. "Well, you should. Because you don't belong here. Not with that car, not with your attitude." Lily felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She wanted to tell him that she had as much right to be there as anyone else. She wanted to ask him how he could judge her without knowing anything about her. But instead of arguing further, she simply turned and walked toward her front door. She could feel their eyes on her as she went inside, their judgment hanging heavy in the air. That night, Lily sat in her living room, staring out the window. She could still hear their voices, their mocking laughter echoing in her mind. She felt a deep ache in her chest. She had never felt so alienated in her own neighborhood. All of her hard work, her sacrifice, and everything she had fought for seemed to mean nothing to them. To them, she wasn't a person who had earned her success. She was just someone who didn't belong. But Lily wasn't the type to let negativity define her. She had worked too hard for too long to let these people take away her sense of accomplishment. The whispers and insults hurt, but she would not let them dictate who she was or how she felt. If they didn't like her car, if they didn't like her success, that was their problem, not hers. The next day, she decided she wouldn't let their words control her. She would continue to drive her Lamborghini with pride. She wouldn't shrink back into the shadows just because a few people couldn't handle her success. She had worked too hard to be ashamed of who she was. And as she walked out the door, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of defiance bubbling up inside her. No matter how many times they mocked her, no matter how many insults they threw her way, she would stand tall. She would be unapologetically herself, and that was something they couldn't take away. Lily had made a choice. She wasn't going to let the negativity from the group of people in her neighborhood affect her. She had worked too hard to let their words hold any weight. Every time they mocked her or gave her those judgmental looks, she reminded herself that she was not the one in the wrong. It was easy to feel defeated when the world seemed to be against you. But Lily wasn't the type to give up. She would keep living her life and enjoying the rewards of her hard work, no matter what anyone else thought. But the tension in the neighborhood didn't go away. In fact, it seemed to grow. Every day, the group of people who had been mocking her seemed to find new ways to make her feel like an outsider. It wasn't just the occasional insults or the stares anymore. They had become more direct. As Lily parked her Lamborghini one afternoon, she saw them standing near her driveway again, talking among themselves. "Here she comes again, thinking she's all that," one of the voices called out. Lily took a deep breath and kept walking. She knew they were trying to get a rise out of her, but she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. She had already given them too much of her energy. However, as she reached her door, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to find one of the group members standing a few feet away. It was the same man who had been the loudest in criticizing her the last time. This time he wasn't making jokes or insults. He seemed serious. "You really think you can just walk around here with that car like you're above everyone?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual but still full of disdain. Lily stopped in her tracks. She wasn't sure what to expect this time. She had hoped that maybe they would grow tired of the jokes, but it seemed like they were determined to make her life uncomfortable. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, but she held it back. She wasn't going to let him get to her. "I'm not above anyone," Lily said calmly, though her voice shook slightly. "I'm just a person who's worked hard for what I have. This car doesn't change who I am," the man scoffed. "Yeah, right. You think you worked hard? You think you deserve that car? It's just a toy for someone like you." The comment stung, but Lily didn't let it show. She had heard enough of this kind of talk, and it wasn't going to break her. She took a deep breath and turned to face him fully. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through or what I've had to do to get here, and it's not your place to judge me." The man seemed to falter for a moment, but then his face hardened again. "I know enough. People like you don't belong with people like us." Lily's heart sank, and she felt a wave of sadness wash over her. It was one thing to be judged for her success, but it was another thing entirely to be judged because of who she was. This wasn't about her car anymore. It was about her race, and how some people saw her as different. She took a step closer to him, her voice steady. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong here, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to hide because you can't handle my success, and I'm certainly not going to let your words control my life. There was a long pause as they stood there staring at each other. The tension between them was thick, but for the first time, Lily didn't feel afraid. She didn't feel like she was about to back down. Instead, she felt a quiet strength rising within her. She had earned the right to be where she was, and no one had the power to take that away from her. The man opened his mouth as if to say something else, but then he seemed to change his mind. He turned and walked away without another word. Lily watched him go, still feeling the weight of the encounter, but also feeling something else, a sense of relief. She had stood her ground. She hadn't let his words break her, and that felt like a small victory. Over the next few days, Lily continued to see the same group of people around her neighborhood. But something was different. They didn't taunt her as much. The mocking laughter was quieter, and when they saw her, they didn't stare as openly. Lily couldn't help but wonder if the confrontation had made them think twice about the way they treated her. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to realize that they had been wrong to judge her so harshly. Then, one day as Lily was walking back to her car, she saw one of the women from the group standing by the sidewalk. She was holding something in her hands, an envelope. Lily didn't recognize her at first, but as she got closer, the woman stepped forward. "Hey, I just wanted to give this to you," the woman said, her voice nervous. Lily blinked in surprise, unsure of what to say. The woman had always been one of the quieter members of the group, but she had still been part of the ones who had mocked her in the past. Now she was standing here holding an envelope. "Is this for me?" Lily asked cautiously. The woman nodded. "Yeah, I think I owe you an apology. I've been thinking about the way I treated you, and I don't want to be that person anymore." Lily stood still for a moment, taking in the woman's words. She wasn't sure what to make of this sudden shift. The woman had been part of the group that had tormented her, but now she was offering an apology. Lily could feel her skepticism creeping in, but she didn't want to shut down the possibility of someone changing. After all, she had always believed in second chances. Taking the envelope, Lily glanced at it, then back at the woman. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I appreciate this." The woman gave her a small smile, looking somewhat relieved. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for the things I said. It wasn't right." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing there, still holding the envelope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Lily opened the envelope carefully and found a handwritten note inside. The words on the page were simple but genuine. "I've been thinking about what you said. You've worked hard for everything you have, and I respect that. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. You deserve better." Lily smiled softly, tucking the note into her pocket. It wasn't the grand apology she had imagined, but it was enough. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. Maybe the judgment hadn't gone away completely, but something had shifted. The group of people who had once taunted her were now seeing her for who she really was. Not just the car she drove, but the person she had worked so hard to become. She didn't know if things would ever fully change between her and the people in her neighborhood, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to let their negativity define her. She would keep living her life, proud of the person she had become, and no matter how much they tried to bring her down, she would rise above it. Lily never expected her confrontation with the group to have such an impact. For weeks after, things between her and the people in her neighborhood seemed different. The mocking and jeering she had become used to faded into the background. It wasn't as if they all suddenly became her friends, but there was an unspoken understanding. The group no longer made cruel remarks, and the tension that had weighed on her so heavily began to lift, though it wasn't completely gone. One afternoon, Lily was sitting on her porch, enjoying the warmth of the sun as she sipped her coffee. It had been a long week, filled with work and more interactions with the people who had once criticized her. But now she felt a sense of quiet peace she hadn't experienced before. She was starting to feel at home again. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, she saw the woman who had apologized to her earlier approaching. This time she wasn't alone. There was another person with her, a young man who seemed a little nervous, as if he wasn't sure what he was walking into. The woman noticed Lily and smiled shyly, motioning for the man to follow. "Hey, Lily," she called. "Can we talk to you for a minute?" Lily stood up, a bit surprised. She had expected the woman's apology to be a one-time thing. not the beginning of an ongoing conversation. "Of course," Lily said, gesturing for them to come closer. The woman introduced the young man as her cousin. He looked a bit hesitant, but there was a genuine look of concern on his face. "I've been talking to him about you," the woman began, "and I just wanted to say we've all been talking a lot since that day. About how we treated you, about how we saw you. We realize we were wrong and we want to make it right." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected any of this. Sure, she had hoped that things might change, but this was something more than she had imagined. She hadn't realized how much their words had weighed on her until this very moment. To know that they were trying to make amends was unexpected, but it also felt like a weight lifting from her shoulders. The young man spoke up, his voice hesitant but sincere. I know I wasn't part of what happened, but I've heard how people have been treating you. I didn't realize it was that bad. I'm sorry for the way they've made you feel. It's not right." Lily looked at both of them, unsure of what to say. They had wronged her, and yet, here they were offering apologies. It felt strange, but in a good way. She had never expected to receive any kind of apology from them. She hadn't even known if they had realized the harm they had caused, but now it seemed like they were genuinely trying to make things better. "I appreciate this," Lily said quietly. "I never expected this kind of response. Honestly, I thought things would just stay the same, that people would keep judging me. But this means a lot." The woman smiled, her eyes softening. "We don't want to be the people who hurt others anymore. We've been thinking about it, and we realize we let our own insecurities get the best of us. We took it out on you, and that was wrong." Lily nodded. "I understand. We all have our struggles, and sometimes we act out because of that. I get it. But it doesn't make what happened right." "I know," the young man said, his voice sincere. "But we're trying to do better. And we want you to know that we see you now. We see what you've accomplished, and we respect it." "We respect you." Lily smiled, the weight in her chest easing a little more. She had spent so much time letting their opinions shape how she saw herself. But now here were people who had wronged her, admitting their mistakes and asking for forgiveness. It wasn't something that happened often, and it certainly wasn't something she had expected. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "Thank you for saying that. It means more to me than you know." After a few more moments of talking, the woman and her cousin made their way back to their house, leaving Lily standing on her porch, still processing the conversation. It felt like something had shifted. She had expected to live with the weight of their judgment for much longer, but now there was a sense of closure. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the neighborhood continued to shift. It wasn't just the apology that made a difference, but the way people started treating her. There were still a few who looked at her with suspicion, but for the most part, the mocking and jeering had stopped. Lily felt as though she had gained something important, not just respect, but the chance to move forward without the burden of resentment weighing on her. Then, a week later, Lily was returning from a meeting when she saw the group gathered again, standing by the corner of her street. This time, though, things were different. There was no laughter, no mockery. Instead, they stood there in silence, watching her drive by. As she parked her car, she noticed them walking toward her. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she wondered if they were going to start again. But when they reached her driveway, it was clear that they weren't there to mock her. The woman who had apologized earlier was with them again, her cousin by her side. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman said, stepping forward, "for being patient with us, for not giving up on us." "It means a lot," Lily blinked in surprise. "I didn't give up on you. I wanted to live my life without letting what happened control me." The group nodded in understanding. "We're sorry for everything. We didn't realize how wrong we were. You've shown us a lot about how to handle things with grace," one of them said, his voice genuine. Lily smiled softly. "It's not about showing you anything. It's about living my truth and not letting anyone take that away from me. And it's about forgiving even when it's hard." They all stood there for a moment, reflecting in silence. It wasn't perfect, and Lily knew that there were still people who might never understand her journey. But this was enough for her. She had faced the negativity head-on and come out on top, not because she was better than anyone else, but because she had the strength to rise above it. As the group turned to leave, Lily watched them go, feeling a sense of peace that she hadn't known in a long time. It was clear that something had shifted, not just between her and them, but within herself. She no longer felt the need to defend herself. She didn't need anyone's approval. Her worth wasn't determined by the opinions of others. She had earned the right to be proud of who she was and what she had accomplished, and no one could take that away. It was a feeling of freedom she hadn't felt in years, and as she watched the sunset from her porch that evening, she knew that the journey wasn't over. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Lily had learned something important over the last few weeks. Her journey wasn't just about the car she drove or the success she had achieved. It was about the person she was becoming in the process. Every time she had faced judgment, every time someone tried to make her feel small, she had been given the opportunity to show who she really was, and with each challenge, she became stronger. The changes in her neighborhood weren't just about the way people looked at her now. They were about how she saw herself. She no longer needed the approval of others to feel good about what she had accomplished. She knew her worth. The car, the success, the things she had earned, they didn't define her. What defined her was her ability to stay true to herself no matter what. But that didn't mean the journey was over. There were still moments when the old insecurities crept in. Moments when she found herself questioning if she had really earned her place in the world. Those moments didn't last long, though. She had learned to embrace them, to let them pass by without letting them control her. She had found a kind of peace she hadn't known before. One evening, as she was leaving her house to grab a few groceries, she noticed something unusual. A group of people, not the ones who had been so cruel before, were gathered around her car. It wasn't the usual crowd of onlookers or critics. These were strangers. They were admiring the Lamborghini, talking among themselves. Lily hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach the situation. She had grown used to the whispers and the stares, but she had never encountered strangers who seemed so openly fascinated by her car. As she walked toward the driveway, one of the women in the group noticed her and smiled. "Wow, that's your car?" she asked, her voice full of awe. Lily nodded, a little unsure of how to respond. "Yeah, it is." The woman's eyes widened. "That's incredible. You must be really proud of it. How did you manage to get it?" Lily felt the familiar sense of pride rise within her, but this time it wasn't about showing off. It was about sharing her story. "I worked hard for it," she said simply. "I put in a lot of time and effort, and when I finally earned it, I knew I had to do something that felt right for me." The woman smiled warmly. "That's amazing. It's not easy to get to where you are. You must be so strong."